Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Move the Stairs episode, podcast, vlog, blog, all of the components of Move the Stairs. How are you, Jordan?
I'm doing really well. I missed out last week. I was off in Idaho ordaining a wedding. Is that how you call it? Ordaining or
officiating?
Officiating. That's the word I'm looking for. I was ordained to officiate.
Do I have to call you Reverend Jordan?
For the purposes of this podcast, you don't have to.
All right. We'll discuss your title later. Well, today I'm really excited about this conversation. Oh, by the way, Diane is off today, but she's on her vacation. So thankfully, everybody at MNC will have had a little bit of time off. But today we are getting into something that is really on everyone's minds right now, right?
You can't not have it on your mind.
You cannot not. It is not possible to not think about politics right now, to not see politics on every channel, on every radio station, on every newspaper, every magazine, everywhere on the internet. So as a business, how do you break through the noise and get your story told right now? How do you navigate this, shall we call, saturated media coverage between now and election day?
Yeah, no kidding. And, it's something that we specialize in. We've forged a number of relationships with reporters, not only here in Denver, but all over the country. And even with our existing relationships, it can be a challenge sometimes based on what's happening. So to help you, we're going to break down this conversation, just like we always do, into a few mini conversations. First things first, we're going to teach you how to read the room. What do we mean by that? We're going to teach you how to analyze the political news cycle so that you can see what's happening out there and in real time. Oh, what is that, Sarah Beatty?
The news cycle analyzation tool, right?
Nice. We're actually going to walk through that in real time. We did an analysis today on what's happening in Denver, Colorado, and we're going to come up with a few mock pitches that we would determine if maybe it would get coverage, maybe it would be best to hold off for another day. Exactly. And then finally, we're going to talk about how you can avoid falling into the political fray inadvertently based on your story, or if you have a reporter coming out to your office, because obviously you want to tell your story, but some stuff you just don't want to get mixed up in. And we're going to teach you how to avoid that altogether. So by the end of this episode, you'll be able to make an informed decision on when and how you should pursue coverage in your local media market during an election year.
Love it. I love it. All right. So first off, and I just dropped this in the comments, let us know where you are watching from. And if you have a second, it's noon Denver time. So it's 11 a.m. Pacific. A lot of shows start at 11. And then the Eastern and Central time zones will have already had their noon shows. What is happening in your media market right now? Let us know. And that's part of the calculation that we're going to be making here. So comment, if you have any comments, questions, drop them in the comment section. We'll either answer them in the show today, or if you're listening to this on replay, comment on one of our social media channels, and we're happy to answer questions, especially as we think about Move the Stairs next week, which is also going to be really interesting and fun. We'll talk about that in a second. And like I said, there's free downloadable included in every episode. Today is the news cycle analyzer. So if you go to our blog page on our website, you'll find that, so you can print it out and use that to work through whether it's a good time to pitch your story or not. So read the room. What does that mean, Jordan? I say this to my kids all the time. Read the room.
Right.
What does it mean in a PR context, Jordan?
So when you're reading the room, at least in the context that we are looking at it from, the lens that we are looking at it of analyzing the political news cycle, what is happening in the news cycle right now that could impact how your pitch is perceived by whomever you're pitching to? I think that's really, really important. You might have to move the stairs a little bit to get your pitch heard, or potentially move the stairs to backtrack your pitch if it is coming at a time where maybe you shouldn't be doing that. So Sarah, what is the kind of move the stairs philosophy before I get too down the rabbit hole here?
For sure. And that's a great point. So we use this term, our episodes are called Move the Stairs. We use this term all the time, and we use it as a guiding principle of philosophy at MNC, which is look at the tools that you have available to you right now, right in front of you, that you have access to, and figure out what you can do with those tools to make it happen. And make it happen is your goal, right? Whatever you're trying to achieve. But it's not sitting there and thinking, oh man, I could totally get coverage if it weren't, wall-to-wall politics. But that's not the world we're in.
Mm-hmm.
I could totally get coverage if I had a great celebrity spokesperson for this. Well, sure. But do you? If you don't, you still have to do your job and get coverage. So it's move the stairs means look at what you've got, look at all your tools, be creative, be clever, work your fanny off trying to find a really good angle, a great pitch, leverage what you've got in front of you and make it happen.
So Sarah, I know you and Diane talked about this a little bit last week in looking at what is your home run market. Media or media outlet, I should say. Home run outlet. So if you're trying to get media coverage and you're looking at maybe your favorite TV station, your favorite newspaper, when we say you should read the room, it's trying to look at what are their headlines? What are they covering right now? Are they covering wildfires? Do they want to hear your pitch about your new flavor of cupcakes coming out? Probably not. And if you are watching from anywhere, east of the Mississippi, you're dealing with the smoke from Colorado wildfires, California wildfires,
right.
Oregon wildfires. So these are things you need to be looking at when you're trying to determine what outlets realistically may pick up your story. And I think for the purposes of this chat, Sarah, we're looking at, local outlets. Who are your local TV stations? What are your local newspapers? Do you have an industry magazine or an interest magazine that's local or national that you should be targeting? What are they publishing right now? And will your pitch kind of come off as a little weird if it's, something crazy happening in the news, especially in your local area?
Well, and this is a place where you can do damage to your brand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I see, media friends and colleagues all the time saying, are you serious, PR person? You pitched me on, new cupcake flavors when we've got 500 houses, up in flames because of the forest. Are you serious? You did that? So they're going to remember you, but they're not going to remember you well.
Right.
So that's a place where you can really inflict long-term brand damage by not having read the room before you toss that pitch out there.
And I think that's really important too. If you're working to establish these relationships with reporters in your media market, wherever that may be, this is going to be something that will actually take you back. It may be the greatest cupcake flavor ever invented. However, if, we've talked about how newsrooms are shrinking and more people and reporters are being asked to do more work, and that's just not going to help them. And you're just plugging up their inbox. So, but on the flip side, if it's a slow news day, and there's no such thing anymore with the 24/7 news cycle, I think you would agree. Yeah, exactly. I'd get kicked out of the newsroom for saying that. But if it's a slower day where you're looking at maybe the top story that you watched at noon 10 minutes ago here in Central or Mountain Time, is something to the effect of, I don't know, maybe a car accident or something. It's serious, yes, but that's not going to lead every single newscast for the rest of the day. Mm-hmm. You may have an opportunity to create your pitch without coming off as insensitive, and maybe work those angles with relationships in journalists that you're establishing. So speaking of which, Sarah, all these reporters, they're being asked to do so much. And we know during election season, politics really takes center stage. I mean, it's almost being covered like a football game now, play by play by play by play. So are there even reporters out there who could cover somebody's pitch?
Well, okay. Yes and no. So, we talked about this yesterday. If you are taking a little bit of a broad view of politics, right now, politics is kind of infusing every single coverage angle. Obviously, the political reporters are wall to wall busy. There's the breaking news reporters. There's protests pretty frequently. They get a little rowdy pretty frequently. So your breaking news reporters are really busy. Your investigative reporters, are typically on long form projects. So, they're in the middle of things. Health reporters, the few that are left that do specifically health coverage, are covering COVID, which has, pretty significant political undertones as well. So you can see, well, let's see what's left, like home, sort of home and garden and features. There's, I think, 4 features reporters left in the country. But, anybody who would be covering something lighter and fluffier that, cupcakes might have been an interesting, fun story at some point a while ago. They're all doing, how do you protect your house and protect your home and create a space for homeschooling during COVID, right? So, COVID as a political adjacent, sort of use of time has really drifted into all of the coverage areas. Food, dining, my goodness. There was a point where we thought, oh, you could pitch dining any day of the week, great new restaurant or great new cupcake flavor and get some coverage. Well, now, even the dining journalists, the food journalists are covering, this very precarious time for restaurants. So it's a very hard news angle. So you can see, that's kind of a wall, right?
Right.
This political COVID wall is significant. It's tall. It's somewhat impenetrable. That's a lot to deal with. If you're trying to pitch, new cupcake flavor or something that isn't specifically newsy or specifically kind of a lighter look at something or really eye-catching. Right?
So where does that leave the cupcake owner? They've got this really great flavor and it's just going to knock your socks off. It can be the greatest thing you've ever eaten. And not only that, Sarah, it's good for you. It's got all the healthy and nutritious elements. But between COVID,
cupcake. Somebody tell me where to get this cupcake.
I need this now too. I've got a few in my fridge, but I don't think they have the nutritional elements that my body's seeking.
Yeah.
But it's a fair question. I mean, people have this great idea and, they want to get it out there. But at the end of the day, between COVID and especially looking at an election year, and there is data out there to show that during an election year, you have a pretty significant uptick in media coverage of politics. Where does that leave, the cupcake stories? It just seems like that there is no room, maybe it's sports getting chopped to add one more story in there. And that does happen. Maybe it's
sports is covering COVID stuff.
Right. Exactly.
Like the coaches getting fined for not wearing masks last week. Whoops.
Yep.
Exactly. So you can see how this has pervaded, all of the topics, all of the areas that you used to be able to sort of target those particular beat reporters. There's an old term. And they're all of these beats anymore are related to politics. But I want you to get into, because I think this is fascinating, some of that data, and we're going to solve the cupcake problem.
Yes, we are. We're
going to solve it. But get into this data about just the sheer volume on an election year.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I pulled this data from the Pew Research Center. And they are a fair organization. So they don't have an agenda one way or the other. And that's what we like to look at as journalists is, what source can we take data from that doesn't have a leaning one way or the other and is balanced. And so they analyzed the 2008 election. And that, mind you, this is 12 years ago 12 years ago.
That's a million years ago.
Yeah, it feels like it with COVID.
Right.
But they found that in the day before the election and the weekend just following the election, that 67% of online news coverage was of the election. So you're talking about
almost 3/4.
Yeah, you're talking about not only election day results, you're talking about the new administration coming in, and you're also talking about policies with that administration. And I did a little more digging, Sarah. I know this isn't in our show notes, but if you factored in the congressional races into that, it was 80%.
80. So we're not making this up, folks.
Right. That's pretty wild. And, network news are obligated to cover some other things, so the number wasn't that high. But there's something to be said about appearing in an online article compared to being on TV and getting your 15 minutes of fame. And that is, more recent data has shown that people are turning to online resources, which should come as no surprise to anybody. As we continue to kind of move forward here in the digital age, that continues to increase. I believe in 2006 or 2008, that number was in the high 30% range. And now, as of the 2016 election, that number is right around 43%. If I had to bet, Sarah, I'd say that number is probably higher in the 2020 election of just how we're digesting news. Yeah.
Yeah. Or have news indigestion.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, okay, let's kick around a couple of ways that we have pulled off some media coverage without carefully, thoughtfully. Right. Using insider media relations. Here's an example. This was almost exactly a year ago. We were working with Urban Putt, which is a wonderful indoor, they call it playable art. It's this fabulous mini golf place, and they have wonderful food and craft cocktails and these just wild, it's so good and so fun. What a great place. So it's a really light, fun, upbeat story. And they were selling shares. You could buy into it. You could buy stock. And so we were just about to issue a press release on it. And the press release had been written. It was loaded up. I mean, I was like ready to press the button. And unfortunately, that morning was the morning of the STEM school shooting here in the Denver metro area. And, also at that point, then every single TV station, both of the news radio stations or all of the news radio stations, the newspapers, the online newspapers, AP, national news, everybody in the world was covering that. And it was nothing but that, very terrible and upsetting event, really from the start of the show to the end of the show. And so that was a situation that it was just very, very clear. This is not the moment to even, and this is a brand damaging potential moment. If we were to drop this release now, and, say, hey, come cover this great, fun, upbeat, wild and crazy story, during a very tragic event. So that was a real easy one for me to make that phone call to the client and say, we're going to hold. And actually, we held for maybe 10 days on it. It was like 5 to 10 days.
I mean, it was a really big story when it happened, and it's hard to believe it was only last year.
Right.
It feels like so much has happened since then. But yeah, the 1 year anniversary wasn't too long ago. And can you just, think about, if you're watching or on replay live, think about, what if that was your brand that says, hey, come out and cover my new cupcake flavor. It's not only nutritious, but it's the best thing you'll ever taste. Meanwhile, you have, high school age students who are, dead from a school shooting, and everyone is covering it. That's why, a little off topic, Sarah, but it is important to stay up to date on the news cycle, whether you're ready to pitch something or not, just so you know kind of what's happening. Just follow the top stories. Being in the know is not going to hurt your business or brand. In fact, it may help you down the road.
Oh, I think it'll always help you. I mean, just to be able to think about angles that you might not have thought of before. Sure. At a minimum, you need to know what's going on. Is this the moment when media are going to be receptive to this pitch. Let's walk into a little bit more challenging example.
Okay.
So here's one where something has changed over time. So we work with an agricultural client who has worked with, they hire immigrant workers that are through this visa program. It's all, above board, and all of the background is top notch, and they hire the same workers year after year, and it's a great program. Mm-hmm. And it's worked well for years. And for quite a while, there were occasionally questions about immigrant labor, and do you have enough people, and are they able to get here? And we even had some positive stories on, like, here's everything that they do to make it easier for the workers and take care of them, and it's this real family friendly kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Well, those were great stories until about 2017, and then politics around immigration shifted significantly. Mm-hmm. Interest, right, in immigration shifted significantly, and that politics came flooding in, right, so that it was almost impossible to walk a thoughtful, strategic, kind of middle of the road line about immigration. And so, we were getting requests for this client. Hey, will the client talk about, the importance of immigrant workers? Or would the client talk about how many immigrant workers they use, and how many they bring in, and are they legal? And, so you could kind of get an idea of the politics that were coming at you through the tone of questioning. And, we worked with a client and just said, there's really not a benefit here.
Right.
There's no more benefit to talking about this. There's really only risk. And so, and that was one of those cases. We talked about this last week. How do you say no nicely to the media? And that was an instance where we just said, gosh, they are working so hard. And, you might talk to some of the congressional folks about mm-hmm. it. You might talk to some of the various other groups about it. But, we don't really have we don't have a story for you there.
So that's a really important instance of how you read the room for your clients in both of those scenarios, with Urban Putt and the agricultural client. And you said, this is probably not the right time. They're great stories, but now's not the right time for it. And, if you choose to hold on a story, it could be years before you pitch it again, such as immigration. That's still a hot topic 3 years later in 2020. But if it's more of a short-term kind of breaking news scenario, you can still thoughtfully pitch it. But it's good to be mindful of what's happening locally from that breaking news story as well. So if you have an important court date coming up, if the family is going to be holding some sort of candlelight vigil for a tragedy that happened, those are things to kind of keep in the back of your mind, I think, as well. So, Sarah, what I like about what we're doing today, just like you guys did last week, you and Diane, we're going to walk through that one sheet, and I've been waiting to do this.
This is going to be fun.
Cycle analyzer. How cool is this?
All right. So when you guys print out the news cycle analyzer sheet, and it just codifies a process that we do sort of automatically, mm-hmm. Is so in pretty much every media market, you're going to have a CBS, ABC, NBC, Fox affiliate. Sometimes Fox joins newsrooms with one of the other affiliates. So sometimes mm-hmm. 3, sometimes it's 4 local affiliates. And then you've got newspapers. Sometimes online newspapers. So in Denver, we have one printed newspaper, and then we have a handful of digital outlets. And then we have a handful of news radio stations. So, depending on who you work with and where you want to get coverage. So that home run outlet calculation that we talked about last week, you're going to go and you're going to check those stations, and walk us through how we would do that, Jordan.
So what this analyzing document has done is we printed out, and we want you to check online. You can watch, but again, the most up-to-date breaking news, most important stories on any media outlets will be on their website, and it will be in order of importance as well. So,
and I will note, if you go to their website and you see breaking news and they have the live feed, stop right there.
that's a really good point.
Yeah, just, you don't even have to fill this out. If you see breaking news, we're live at such and so, stop.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. If they've got the news helicopter up and feeding back
if the bird's
live
up, you're
images.
done.
And we're not talking about the LAPD, California Highway Patrol chases that, seem to be on, they'll pop on Facebook every now and again. Right. But we're talking about something happening right now in your community. Forget it. Don't worry about it. You come back to it tomorrow.
Yeah. But assuming we don't have breaking news happening. Right. So tell us how we use this analyzer sheet.
So what we want you to do is, if you have a really good story pitch, we want you to go on to all four, assuming you have all four media outlets, CBS, ABC, NBC, Fox, look at your local newspaper, look at your radio, and I want you to look at their top stories. What are they? Are they impactful? Are they overlapping? That's the $1 million question, Sarah, right? Or maybe the top story or second story underneath, are they the same? Do you have any mix and match there?
Right.
And if you're finding that there's a consistent top story across media outlets,
forest fire,
exactly, chances are they've got their hands tied, and that's going to be their priority moving forward. It's going to be what's happening with the forest fire, with another reporter talking about evacuations from the forest fire, another reporter talking about homes that have been burned in the forest fire, another reporter talking about ways you can help people who have been displaced by the forest fire.
Their entire crew is on forest fire duty, including weather, probably including sports, on all the high school sports that are being canceled, or, tournaments that are being impacted or whatever.
Exactly. So with that being said, your pitch is probably either going to get buried in the news desk. If you call them, as soon as you say, hey, do you want to hear about my new flavor of cupcakes? Brain is automatically going to shut off because they've got bigger fish to fry. They're waiting to hear from their reporters in the field. They're waiting to hear from sheriff's offices. They're waiting to hear from, the lead agency fighting the wildfires. They don't have time to deal with your cupcakes, as tasty as they may be.
Right. We're going to solve the cupcakes, though. Hang tight, because we're going to solve them at the end of this section. So here's the fun thing we're going to do. You have checked the top stories in Denver at 11 and noon today. Walk us through what you found when you filled out this analyzer for Denver Media today.
So before I dive into this, we want to know what top stories you saw. Maybe it was you started watching us at noon. Let's just assume you're in Mountain Time. So maybe you missed the noon news or your midday newscast. What did you see this morning as you were getting ready for work? What was the top story in your local area? And does that compare to some of the other stations that may be in your media market? But first of all, one media outlet, Sarah, had a top story of a pronghorn poaching case being solved by a canine. Okay.
All right. Interesting. Not super breaking news.
No. Interesting, though. That's
interesting.
Kind of cool. Let's move on to the next one. Coronavirus. Hey, we didn't talk about that a minute ago.
Yeah, let's get more info on that.
Yeah, CU Boulder students speak out against new public health order. Okay, so that's been burbling all week because CU has been changing its policies, and they've been changing schools. So that's kind of a continuation. That's not like they've just made a change to classes today or this week or whatever. It's kind of a reaction story. So it's a bit of a follow-up. Right, but it is COVID, kind of one of those two things that we're like, politics and COVID eating up most of the airtime, it seems like. All right, how about this one? This is going to sound familiar too, Sarah. State releases guidance for restaurants, events during winter months. Many restaurants have relied heavily on extended patios to stay open over the summer. Some may have to change things up as winter nears. Okay, so that's what we would call a look-ahead piece. Yep. So again, this isn't breaking news. This is, I have a slow enough news day
that we're able to kind of go, well, I wonder what's going to happen to restaurants. Now, it's a business story. It's a potentially dining story. It's a COVID story. So you've got the overlap of those topics, but it's not a, there's nothing that has broken today about that. There's no new guidance issued or no new, something that has changed today. So that's a look ahead.
So this is media station number 4. And this is going to be a quote. "I'm afraid this is domestic abuse. Suzanne Morphew's brother says husband not participating in search carrying shotgun to keep people off property."
Okay, so this is a very unfortunate story that's also been in the works all week of a spouse who's gone missing. So that sounds like, again, a follow-up piece on an ongoing story. There's nothing, they haven't found her, they haven't arrested anyone, so again, that is 4 stations, TV stations, 4 very different top stories, and none of them that have a breaking news component.
Correct.
So is today the day for cupcakes, Jordan?
I think every day is the day for cupcakes personally. Well, let's keep it rolling here. Newspaper, top story. Fall colors expected to peak across Colorado this weekend. Pretty excited for that.
Well, and now don't get me wrong, Colorado loves its fall colors. So that's been one of those topics that's been going for a couple of weeks. People are very excited, but again, not breaking.
And then lastly, the top story on radio is Wyoming senator talks SCOTUS situation, and that's Supreme Court of the United States.
So again, continuation. Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. It's 12:32 on Friday afternoon. Would you pitch cupcakes right now?
No.
I wouldn't either.
No way.
Why?
I think about when you're watching, and maybe you should think about this too the next time you watch a newscast. What do you see at 5 or 5:30 or 6 or 10 or 11, whenever your kind of evening or late night newscast is? There's always going to be an emphasis on breaking news. Something may happen later this afternoon, maybe a shooting, maybe a major road closure from a car accident.
Well, and so getting back to politics, you know what's going to happen this afternoon? I don't know what it is, but you know what's going to happen is the Friday night news drop.
Yeah.
That's when politicians put out their skeletons on Friday night thinking that nobody's in the newsroom, nobody's going to cover it. Well, every single Friday night for, ever, it's been, crazy news drop after crazy news drop. So they're going to do it after 5 p.m. East Coast time. That's 3 o'clock our time. So are you going to pitch cupcakes between 12:30 and 3 o'clock?
Probably not.
No. When would you pitch cupcakes? With a news cycle like this, when would you pitch cupcakes?
Right. So if you have, a product or a service or a brand or something that you're trying to get out there, and you've got just kind of the latest and the greatest and the coolest thing, first of all, be thinking about your angle. But if I'm looking at a new cupcake flavor that's just going to blow your mind, I'm going to target either weekend morning shows or weekday morning shows. I'm going to show you how it's made. I'm going to give you some awesome visuals, because that's what news stations want, is not just a story, but if you can make their life easier by packaging them up some video to send along with your story pitch, that's pretty cool. Is there another element with your cupcake where the first 100 people are going to get them free? Are you going to host a fundraising event for, how about this, Sarah, a fundraising event for those people who have lost their homes in the wildfire?
That's what I would do.
Yeah.
If it were a wildfire, if we were facing a wildfire right now, here's what I would do. I would package up however many boxes of these cupcakes, and without doing a press release, without doing anything, I would deliver them to the firefighters on the front lines, or I would deliver them to the evacuation shelters or something like that. And I would not do a release. I would just package them up beautifully, deliver them, and say, thank you so much. We're thinking of you, whatever. But then if you wanted to do a release, that's exactly what I would do, Jordan. I would say, somehow we were collecting, it's canned food drive, and, you get a free cupcake if you bring in canned food for the folks who've been evacuated, or,
Right.
Pet food or whatever it might be. Make it applicable, make it, be community minded in how you're pitching this, because it's not the time to talk about your fabulous cupcakes. It's the time to talk about what you're doing to make things better for people in your community.
So we came up with 3 different kind of fictitious pitches that, based on what we
based on today's news cycle.
Right. And I'm feeling pretty good about these, Sarah, because the news cycle is really not that hard here in Denver today. Hopefully none of the news desks hear me say this, because they'll be cursing my name.
They'll be like, right.
Yeah.
We're here doing it.
Thanks for jinxing us, dude.
Right.
So pitch number 1, your seasonal pumpkin pitch. Let's go back to that agricultural client.
Yeah.
Is this a good time to be pitching pumpkins? The pumpkin patch is open. They've got deals, family fun. Family
farmers, family, sort of is the answer to that.
Okay.
I would not pitch, I wouldn't pitch a news story. They're not going to march out to the pumpkin patch between now and 10 o'clock. Not going to happen. But what I would do is I would go out and shoot lots of video on, pumpkins, and it's a gorgeous sunny blue sky day, pumpkins in the field, the tractor going through, the kids running around. Careful, make sure you have permission on sharing video with kids in it. If you've got other activities or whatnot, boy, I'd get video and photos of all that. And I would send that off to Jordan.
Weekend mornings?
No, meteorologists.
That's
where you stand really the only chance at getting some 10 p.m. coverage. Send it to the 10 p.m. meteorologists and say, oh my gosh, you guys, here you go. Lots of great video. But then after that, I would pitch the weekend morning shows.
See, that's really smart. And I think that's where some people can move the stairs. Twitter is going to be your best friend when you want to communicate with journalists, because we're all on there. And if you were to fire off a tweet to me back when I was doing weather and say, hey, we had a great day at the pumpkin patch. Look at all these kids, be mindful, make sure people have their masks on and stuff, so you don't get in trouble with that. You don't want to damage your brand that way through, trying to be cognizant of things that are happening to promote your brand. Be careful of the mask situation, but that's the easiest way. Some stations show photos, others don't, but man, that's a really good point I think you brought up there, Sarah.
So, okay. How about you've got some useful information, some health information.
Okay. So
COVID, it's COVID related. COVID's big, we know this, but it's information to a specific group, like how lung cancer patients are being affected, the latest information on how it specifically affects this group of lung cancer patients. Would you pitch that today?
Standalone? No. If I could localize it, maybe. Because I think at the end of the day, if it's a day shaping up like we looked at for our news cycle analyzer, this could be a great kind of, I don't want to say human interest story, but if you can tell somebody's story through that piece of information that's relevant, it may not be brand new. You've got a chance. If that piece of information is brand new and you can localize it, I'm feeling a little better about it. What do you think?
Well, where I would go with this is one of the, and I'm thinking of a local anchor in particular. I would go for the Sunday 5-6 p.m. shows. And I would go for an anchor that, or a reporter that has covered healthcare information, previously. But before I did it, I would make sure that I have a patient over a weekend for them to talk to and a doc for them to talk to. on a weekend, because they're going to be like, I need a patient, I need a doc.
Right.
If you can't help me on a weekend, because the health centers, the PR health centers and all of that, may not be able to get somebody over a weekend. So make sure you've got your ducks in a row. But I might go at the Sunday 5 p.m. shows on that, because they're a little bit newsier. It's the sort of looking ahead to the week. It tends not to be breaking news unless there's a lot going on. It's kind of a look ahead for the week vibe on those Sunday evening shows. So that's where I would go with that one.
Not to mention they get really good viewership too.
Great viewership.
Yes.
All right. All right. Here's, I think, our most challenging one.
Mm-hmm.
Local municipality hires a new police chief, and there's no, it's not like they've had problems or anything, but it's a new police chief, and this new police chief has some really interesting ideas. Would you pitch this story about new police chief on Friday afternoon? That looks like what it looks like today.
That's a really tough one, given the environment that we're in right now, right? With all of our rapid cultural changes that have occurred in 2020. I don't know. That's going to be one where I feel like we would have to really sit down and hammer out a strategy if we were to pursue that. What would be some of those changes, and why would it be newsworthy? Is it something that is radically different than is happening in other places around the country? Is it, how would the public perceive that change? Or is the public just going to see police and, automatically go to, all of the things that are happening around the country right now?
Right.
It's difficult.
That one's, I think, a challenging one. I think this isn't definitive, but honestly, on this one, I would go toward perhaps a newspaper, or public radio station, and say, look, there's this really interesting angle. There's something unusual about this. Right. There's something new, forward-looking. This is a great story about a great municipality and a really talented new person coming in. And so you're not explicitly saying it's a good news story, but you're just kind of saying this is, you would mine this for all of the most interesting elements. But I think that this isn't a TV story. I think this is maybe a public radio sort of talk show discussion story, or
right.
A newspaper long form where you might pitch something saying, hey, why don't you come meet this new person? Follow the journey, follow the, you might follow this over time. It might be a long-term thing, like, follow for 3 to 6 months and, give updates on how things are going.
I think that's a great point. As you're looking at trying to get coverage during the election season or breaking news or anything that's kind of dominating the headlines, it's good to analyze what different media outlets you have at your disposal and who might be best at telling your story. Right. In this particular case, I agree 100%. If you can get a little bit more in depth, because think about it. This to me, on TV, should TV pick it up, is a 20 second max story. It's more of, hey, this is happening. No context behind it. This is happening and there's going to be changes. Right. And then the viewer's like, wait, what changes? What's happening? Why do there need to be changes? And all these questions arise where if you were to go a different way, you can have all of those questions potentially answered.
Right. All right, so we're a little bit heavy. So one of the things that should be obvious by now is that we're really taking a look at the news cycle here locally, and what's going on right now on the ground today, this minute, or this 44 minutes ago. I think we could do an entire episode, an entire discussion on if if one of our clients came to us and said, we really want to take a political stance this way or that way. We think it's important. We think it's a great business strategy, and we want you to help us roll this out. This is what we're going to do. We're going to take a stand on X. That's a whole hour long, maybe two, maybe 17-hour long, discussion, I think, for another day. But that's not generally the case. And I don't think it's generally the case for most companies.
Mhm.
Most companies, have their, their things that they support, the things that they care about, the
Right.
sort of charitable community organization things that they work on. And they're generally looking to walk that middle of the road. We've got customers that come in with all kinds of political opinions and background, and we serve everyone, and that works fine for us.
Right.
So thinking about that group, we're going to walk through some of the ways to help keep you out of trouble, because there's some things that you might not think about, right, when you are trying to walk that tightrope. But very quickly, look ahead to next week for us, would you?
Yeah, for sure. So, as you know, our loyal viewers, thank you so much for watching. We tackle a new topic each and every week. Our goal is to protect your brand and build your business. And next week, we're going to be returning to our roots, and we're going to be talking about the Wild West of CBD. So lace up your cowboy boots, Sarah Beatty.
You're not a cowboy.
I am not from the West.
Most cowboy boots don't have laces. So skip that part, but put on your boots.
Of the millions of people watching this video, you just had to call me out, didn't you?
I'm sorry, but cowboy boots don't lace, pal.
So if you have questions about CBD in general, if you're a CBD business owner, entrepreneur, feel free to email them, post them on this thread here, and we'll get to those questions for next week.
And by Wild West, we mean, rapidly changing regulation.
Sure.
Changing regulation in different states, different regulations for different states, staying compliant, and then building a loyal audience. Building brand loyalty where in an industry that may not have a lot of brand loyalty. So
keeping
that's
yourself out of social media jail too.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh golly, that's a whole thing. Okay. Some of the things to consider to keep yourself out of hot water. Now, my dad said this, and he said it, how dads say things and years and years and years, and you hear it over and over again. My dad has always said, we have a secret ballot in this country for a reason. Any American can walk into the voting booth or sit down at their dining room table with their mail-in ballot, and they can vote their conscience, and they answer to no one, right? We all have that right. That's what we do in this country. And so my dad's former military, and you would not be surprised for that kind of attitude from a military person who, they're very, very, very careful not to take a stand either way. Some military officers won't even vote. So I have always taken that very seriously, that, just because you can run your mouth and let everybody know which politics are, does not mean you should. Doesn't mean you have to. So, you can always kind of take that stance of, folks, we have the blessing of a secret ballot for a reason. Yeah. So that's where I would start.
And, for the other half, I don't know. It certainly seems like it's the majority that do the complete opposite of that, with the amount of noise that you see on social media nowadays. But as you are preparing to pitch your story to media, if that reporter is good at what they do, they're going to do their background research on you. And if
where are they going to do that background research?
Social media, of course. Social media. They may look at your page, they may look at your company page or your brand page. And because we're in such a polarizing political environment, if your story that you're trying to pitch can, at any point in time, even remotely parallel something political happening, there's a chance that a question may come up from a reporter about it, such as, what if the icing on your cupcakes are blue? What
Yeah,
if they
or
are red?
yeah, do you have GMO ingredients or non-GMO or
Sure.
right? I mean, it's like you can very quickly start to see how a political impression of you or your business is formed by something that seems incidental at the time.
Right. On social media, such as, liking a meme. I mean, I see memes every day, and some of them are funny, and sometimes I like them, and sometimes I laugh and keep scrolling. Engagements, sharing news, whether with your opinion to an article, and whether, I mean, that's a whole another story of, what
Well,
sources are you sharing news from?
and here's the difference. So you may think that because you personally or your company, the social media that you manage, doesn't get onto social and say, I believe X or, I'm against Y, that by just not posting things like that, your politics aren't very clear. But if you're going through and liking and clicking and sharing and ha-haing and, thumbs up and thumbs down and, whatever, on political posts of people that you follow on social media, it's the same thing.
Yeah, and it could come up in your interview too, and that's just not something you want, to try to go from a positive PR scenario to kind of backpedaling or being, taken off guard by something that, somebody has asked you because you've shared something controversial on your personal page, and it's now impacting your brand. And, one of the controversial things happening now, Sarah, are masks.
Yeah.
And, you're starting, mine is Darth Vader. I love mine. So unless you don't like Star Wars, I'm not making anybody mad, but people are using masks to, put out a political message in many cases. So you have to be careful about that. I mean, something as simple as a yard sign or a flag or a bumper sticker. My gosh.
Bumper sticker. Now, here's one that we thought about. So here's a hypothetical example. You have, you have invited reporters to your cupcake shop to cover this fabulous new cupcake that everybody's going to love. And your car is sitting in the parking lot and it has, I hate X on the bumper sticker or something.
Something equally as terrible.
Equally as terrible as I hate X. Who could hate X, right?
Exactly.
Right. And so the reporter pulls in and yours is the only car there, and they walk in and they think, well, that's interesting. Somebody hates X. So they now have formed potentially an opinion about you by, your bumper sticker in the parking lot. And it sounds far-fetched, except that, we can tell you, we can give you all of these examples of times where something came up and it came up in an interview when you were on camera and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? That came out of the blue.
Right.
And you don't realize that, there were potentially, I'm trying to think of, this agricultural client, they have wonderful land management stewardship and things like that. Well, if somebody saw a bumper sticker saying I hate X, it kind of doesn't align a little bit,
and I think it takes away from the message that you're trying to put out there. It dilutes your story with something different. I mean, right, wrong, or indifferent. It takes away from what you are trying to convey to that reporter, who is then going to convey that to their audience.
Right. So we all, as business owners, we also have to think, we've got multiple people representing a business, right? I mean, if you have employees, you've got X number of people representing your business. You've got somebody managing your social media potentially.
Sure.
How do you go about walking that tightrope if it's not just you on the tightrope?
Well, I think you have to lead by example here. And I pulled a relatively recent article from Forbes that was published just last month in August, and they outlined some of the things that you can do to kind of quell that election chatter at the office, because you can't you can't just say you're not allowed to talk about it, because it doesn't work like that in 2020. It's far too much of a polarizing subject. But what you can do is promote an environment of mutual respect, because within this article, there was another piece of data that came up from a recent survey that said 50% of people in the workplace felt distracted by presidential election talk. That's brand new data. And if half of your workforce can't focus on their deadline because you've got, chatter about the election deadline from, cubicles near you or whatever it is, that's ultimately going to take away from your company's bottom line or, whatever goal they're trying to accomplish. So I think the best way to go about this is to focus on that aspect of mutual respect. And, maybe it's just because we spend too much time on social media, Sarah. And there's a complete opposite of mutual respect on social media. But these are your coworkers. I feel like in the office place, if the conversation has to be had, you should be able to have that conversation, right?
Well, so the first question I would ask is, does the conversation have to be had? Is this so you're not policing water cooler conversation, right?
No,
because
of course
you can't,
not.
Right? You can't, the boss has no place to say you can say this or you can't say that,
right,
at the water cooler.
Or lunchtime, your lunch break.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
But the boss can also set the example by, not coming in and saying, whoa, did you see, can you believe that so-and-so did such and such? Yeah. As a boss, as a manager, as a team leader, that is not a place I would go. I just wouldn't instigate conversations like that. I wouldn't participate in conversations like that. I think that leading by example means, being able to come in and just sort of very gently but quickly navigate past conversations like that into something that's productive for the office.
Or maybe it's just, you nip it right in the bud from the get-go. There was a quote from the article I really liked, and it said, if and when these discussions do surface, help your team find common threads between one another. Sharing stories about why they believe what they do can be a powerful exercise. There's a lot of power in storytelling. And if one employee shares, follow it up with questions. And they pulled a quote from Stephen Covey. If you're not familiar, for whomever's watching, he was an educator, an author, businessman, amongst many other things, passed away years ago. But he said, seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Mm-hmm.
And in the political realm, with everybody sharing their opinions, it's so important. Just hear them out, and then they'll hear you out, and then come to an understanding. You don't have to agree.
But I think that the key piece of this is it a discussion? A discussion is a two-way conversation.
Exactly.
Where we are sharing our point of view and we are endeavoring to understand the another person's point of view. That this is an active thing. This is not hanging out to say that's complete bunk and here's why.
Right.
Right. So a discussion is not hollering, in the break room. How can you possibly believe that? That's ridiculous. Right.
So I think what we've covered, so far in this mini conversation, Sarah, is how, people can keep their political kind of personas clean, so you don't have any mixed messages, not only in the office, but also kind of online or in your, place of work, or maybe it's in the bathroom. I don't know. There's no distraction by a reporter when they're coming to talk to you about a story that you have pitched to them by political lines.
No political interference.
Yeah, exactly. And we kind of did this recently. I know we're running short on time, but I thought this was really cool. How we managed that agricultural client in, a fairly politically charged situation, and how we pitched a story and kept it away from that, and got some pickup on it too.
Well, yeah, very briefly, what we normally do is deliver the first box of this agricultural product to the governor every year because it's a big Colorado product.
Mhm.
And it's great. And every year, the gov comes out and plays ball and says, "Oh, these are wonderful," and
Yeah.
it's great. This was not that year. The governor, that we have COVID. We are back to COVID. We have COVID. We have major politics because the governor's having to navigate, COVID and mask policies, and some people like it, some people don't. So there's, incredibly intense feelings about the governor right now, one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Would you eat something that somebody delivers to you right now? Probably not. So they're just like the optics of it were just wrong from the get-go. It just was not the year. And so instead, we helped the client put together a donation to a food bank because it's a tough time for many families, many times for the first time. And so we put together a donation of 4 tons of these of food, this really favorite food. And they donated it to the food bank, and the food bank was wonderful and took a bunch of pictures, and that got out to a bunch of people who needed it. And it just built it created thought leadership. It was the thought leadership of this group, and it built their brand image, and it really, we call that refilling the trust bucket to think community first and think, how can I make it better? How can I, show and demonstrate that I'm a part of this community? I care about this community. And this is really important. And this was the right thing to do this year.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to look at that and say, it's okay to break the cycle given the circumstances that we have. That's how you move the stairs. That's our mantra. It's the entire, reason why we do these podcasts and webinars. So today, we talked about how you can read the room, analyze the political news cycle, what's happening around you and in your community, so you can determine if your pitch is really appropriate for the time frame that it's coming out, or if it's going to be close enough to something happening politically, or that breaking news that it may be spun, or your message will get kind of goofed up. We also talked through that one sheet, our news cycle analyzer. Love that. That's free for download as well. Just log on to our website, mnccommunications.com. Click on that Move the Stairs blog tab, and you'll have that there. And then, of course, we just wrapped up avoiding the political fray while you're trying to tell your story.
Lots of stuff today. We're a little bit heavy. So but this was fun. This is a great conversation, and I love working through these, what ifs, these hypotheticals. Because there's a lot of consistency across topics. So this was really fun, and I hope you all enjoyed it. So join us again next week for Move the Stairs.